Welcome, dear friends. Hope you are fine. This is the second part of the series of videos on the topic curriculum planning and development. You might wonder why I took a rather dull topic like curriculum planning and development. I would like to answer this question first. The other day, I asked my Polytechnic College students, I am teaching in a Polytechnic College, to name some new generation jobs that they are familiar with. I was really surprised to hear their answers. To name a few, they said waste management consultant, organic food consultant, robotics technician, stem cell researcher, and the like. I was just thinking whether the curriculum that we give or that we deliver or the curriculum that they follow will equip them to pursue these new gen jobs. So, I just want to sensitize all my dear teachers that if we do not develop curriculum that the society demands or our students are not going to benefit in any way. The second one is, as teachers we should know the art of curriculum planning and development, because at some point in our service we will always be called for this curriculum development, and so we have to contribute our part in the curriculum planning and development. I was lucky enough to work with curriculum development bodies, namely SCERT, State Council for Education Research and Training, and SITTTR, State Institute for Technical Teachers Training and Research, etc. So, I have taken part in many workshops, many curriculum development workshops and syllabus designs. So, there more than the curriculum planners or the curriculum stalwarts or experts, we need real teachers, teachers who know the pulse of students, teachers who can sense the pulse of the class, teachers who work at the grassroots level. So, we need teachers, real teachers. So, in that way, if we know the art of curriculum development, that is going to play a big role in the educational scenario. So, this was another reason why I took up this rather dull topic of curriculum planning and development. Hope you remember my previous video where we saw that curriculum development can broadly be divided into 4 phases. First one, the preparation phase, second one, the development phase, third one, the implementation phase, and the fourth one, the evaluation phase. The first video was all about the preparation phase, where we discussed between the differences, differences between curriculum and syllabus, stages in the preparation phase, namely needs analysis, job profile identification, identifying the tasks involved in these jobs, etc. We also discussed the various tools that can be used to gather data when we administer needs assessment. Here in the second video, we are going to see the stages involved in the second phase of curriculum development, that is the development phase. So, we are going to see in detail the different stages of development phase. The stages involved in this phase are, as you can see from the slide, developing a course rationale, formulating aims, goals and objectives, describing entry and exit levels, choosing a course content, sequencing the course content, preparing the syllabus. And first, now let us examine each of these stages briefly. The first one is course rationale. What do we mean by course rationale? I believe this is the foundation of any curriculum development process, creating the course rationale. It answers the question why we are developing this course, who do we expect to learn this course, how will the students benefit from this course, or what particular skills students are likely to develop after completing this course. To put it short, the purpose of course rationale is to guide the planning of various components of the course and to emphasize the teaching learning the course should exemplify. Course rationale is often written in 2 to 3 paragraphs. Let me read out a course rationale that I took from the net. It goes like this: the course is intended to help the postgraduate students recognize the historical, political and aesthetic dimensions of the growth of literary criticism. Through seminars, discussions and scholarly deliberations, the course seems to enable students concepts related to literary criticism, which include classical Western criticism from Aristotle, English Renaissance, neoclassical criticism, the 18th century trends, the Romantic Revolt and the Victorian tradition. So, look at this slide. It answers the question, the purpose of the course. It answers the question, who is going to take the course. It answers the question, what they are going to learn from this course. It answers the modality of the course. So, course rationale, as we have said, is intended to say more about the course, what do we expect from this course, who are going to learn the course, what are they going to learn, etc. Okay. Now, let us move on to the second phase of curriculum stage, curriculum development stage, that is formulating the aims, goals, objectives of the course. As teachers or when we were students, we must have heard these terms many times, though we may not be able to distinguish between, there are differences between these terms, but we might have heard these terms. If you ask me to hierarchically order them according to the descending order of specificity, I would put aims first and then goals and finally the objectives. So, which one is more specific? Of course, the objectives. Yes. So, let us have a very quick look at the aims, the objectives and the goals. The aims are very broad statements. They have a greater probability that they will not be achieved within a very short span of time. When we read an aim statement, we get a feeling that these will be somewhat difficult to implement. Then you ask the question, then why should we have aims? Aims provide a direction to the educational enterprise. As we have seen, aims are non-specific guidelines. Okay? Yes. Now we come to the goals. What do goals, what is the intention of writing the goals? Goals give flesh and blood to aims. They operationalize the thinking presented by aims. If you ask me which is more specific, goals or aims, I would say goals. It is more specific than aims. They are more specific, and it allows, again it allows both the teacher and students to concentrate on what they are going to learn in the course. By looking at the aims and goals, an average teacher will always be confused. He or she would think whether within this short span of time, will I be able to complete this aims and goals? No. So, what we can have there? Of course, the objectives. So, what is the significance of objectives? I would like to illustrate this with the help of an anecdote. You might have heard of long distance marathon runner called Yamada. In 1953, he won the Boston Marathon in USA. In 1956 also, he won the first prize in the Fukuoka Marathon, Japan. So, when the interviewer asked him, what is the secret behind yours, or what was the secret behind his success? He said, I used my intelligence to defeat my opponents. I used my wisdom to defeat my opponents. So, he said, I just made a thorough study of the path that I am going to run, and I divided the path into different segments, say 40 kilometers, then he would divide the path into 10 kilometers each. He would thoroughly evaluate the terrain, the ups and downs, okay, the different places where he has to run. And so, what did he do? he divided the path into different segments and he tried to set a particular time to reach that particular area. For example, if the first landmark is a bank, he would fix the time as 20 or 25 minutes and he would try his best to reach that particular to targeted aim. So, in that way he divided it into different segments and he tried to win and he won the game. So, this is the exact thing that we do when we direct or when we write the objectives. So, when we look at the aims, it is really confusing. Goals are also as we have said, it is not specific, but when we look at the objectives, they are specific. Okay? We come to know, so that is why when we write objectives, we should always have in mind the word SMART, S-M-A-R-T. Objectives should be specific, S, M, measurable, A, achievable, R, realistic, T, time bound. Okay? So, a curriculum document should always have the aims, the objectives and goals. Nowadays we talk about, we do not talk in terms of aims, objectives and goals, because we are speaking in terms of what we call outcome based education. So, we have instead of aims and instead of aims and goals, we have program outcome or program educational outcome. Instead of course outcome and learning outcome, we have instead of objectives we have course outcome and learning outcome. So, everything is the objectives are renamed or it takes the fashion of outcomes. Okay? Yes. So, what is the difference between a learning outcome and learning objective? So, in the next slide you are going to see the differences between learning outcomes and learning objectives. So, in learning outcomes, describe the learning that will take place across the curriculum through concise statements made in specific and measurable terms of what students will know or be able to do as the result of having successfully completed a course. So, now dear teachers, we are now going to see the differences between a small activity for you. Here you can see a set of sentences. So, what you have to say is, you have to say whether they are objectives, whether they are learning outcomes or whether they are learning objectives. Okay. So, I repeat, you have to say whether the set of sentences that I am going to show you are aims, learning outcomes or objective. Now, let's look at the first set of sentences. Students will study listening skills. Students will learn about business letters. So, that is the first set of sentence. You can see the next set of sentences. Students will learn how to listen effectively in conversational interactions and how to develop better listening strategies. Students will learn how to write effective business letters for use in the hotel and tourism institutions. So, what do you think of the first two set of sentences? The first set of sentences, in the first set of sentences, they are neither learning outcomes nor learning objectives. Why? We are just telling about an activity that the students are going to do or the students will do. Students will study listening skills. What type of listening skills? We do not know. So, it is only an activity. But here when you come to the second set of sentences that I have read to you, that is, students will learn how to listen effectively in conversational interactions and how to develop better listening strategies. They are set from the point of view of the teacher. It is teacher dominant. So, we can say that they are learning objectives. But when you come to the next set of sentences, students will be able to follow an argument, theme or thesis of a lecture. Students will learn how to compare and contrast statements, ideas used in lectures. Students will be able to recognize the gist of a lecture. So, here what is the difference between the second set of sentences and the third set of sentences? The difference is the third set of sentences are set from the point of view of the student. The objectives are always considered from the teacher's point of view, whereas learning outcomes are considered from the point of view of the students. That is why when we write learning objectives, we will be using the word will be able to or will have mastered, etc. And I have told you how to write learning outcomes or learning objectives. We should always remember the word SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Okay. So, one cannot see whenever we hear this word learning outcome or learning objective, the first thing that comes to our mind is Bloom's taxonomy. We cannot just forget Bloom's taxonomy when we think of learning objectives. So, what is this Bloom's taxonomy? Why is Bloom's taxonomy important? When I was a student of B.Ed, Bachelor of Education, I always thought, why Bloom's taxonomy is so much important? Bloom's taxonomy creates a framework for categorizing learning outcomes. Okay? It is significant because it lays out the framework for understanding the different levels of learning. In other words, it tells the teacher the order in which she has to teach various things, so that she can start from the lower level and think of reaching the higher levels of thinking. Okay. So, that is the importance of Bloom's taxonomy. So, whenever we want to develop a beautiful question paper, whenever we want to write learning objectives or learning outcomes, we should have in mind Bloom's taxonomy. So, Benjamin Bloom in 1956, he said learning happens in 3 domains: cognitive, first one; second one affective; the third one psychomotor. It was not Bloom, but there were other educational psychologists who got associated with this, the entire learning process, how learning happens, and what are the different levels in which learning takes place. But it is generally known in the name of Bloom, because Bloom contributed much. Bloom regarded these domains, as I have told you. Bloom said learning happens in 3 domains. And what is a domain? Domain is a category. It is another name for category. Okay. So, Bloom regarded these categories or domains as taxonomy of educational objectives. He called these domains taxonomy of educational objectives. Then comes the question, what is taxonomy? Taxonomy is a method of sequential classification in progressively higher levels. So, domain, I have told you, they are you can if you want to rename domain, you can rename it as category. So, taxonomy means it is grading into higher levels. So, Bloom had plotted subcategories for each level. For, as you can see from the slide, yes, you can now see the slide Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy here, as you can see in the cognitive domain, that is the first domain that Bloom has plotted. The lower form is the knowledge. In that pyramid you can see the lower thing, the lower form is the knowledge. What is knowledge? What is knowledge? It involves recording information or recalling information, terms, facts, rules, principles, etc. So, the key terms or words that are used here are identifying, naming, labeling, recognizing, and the like. Let me make this clear with an example. If I ask the question, identify the villain of the play Hamlet, what would the student do? He would just recollect it and he would say the name. If he knows, he would say the name Claudius. Nothing happens. That is the lower level of learning. He just recalls the word Claudius and reproduces it. So, that is the lower level of learning, that is in the cognitive domain. Bloom said that knowledge is the lower level of domain. Then comes the next domain, the second level that Bloom plotted in the cognitive domain is comprehension. Comprehension is the ability to give examples, summarize and illustrate. The keywords used in the domain are summarize, convert, paraphrase, interpret, accept, etc. You can see in the slide. In comprehension, you can see understanding, translating, summarizing, discussing, etc. Okay. Let me give you an example for this also. If I ask you to differentiate, or if I ask you to tell me about the working of a DC motor, what would you do? You would try to recollect all the things that you said, that you studied, and then you would write it in your own words. Okay. Or if I ask you to differentiate between a sonnet and a ballad, you would the first thing you would think of, you would remember about the different characteristics of a sonnet, then about the ballad, and then you write in your own words. So, you write what you have understood. So, that is the second level plotted in the cognitive domain by Bloom, that is the comprehension level. Then the third domain, the third one is application, as Bloom has, you can see from the slide, the third one in that pyramid is application. What is application? This involves the ability to use rules, principles, methods to solve problems. For example, if I ask you to calculate the voltage across a given electrical network, or if I ask you to sketch the procedure involved when wiring a three-way switch, what you would do? You would apply what you have learned. So, that is the third one. The fourth one is analysis, as Bloom has said. Here analysis, what is analysis? It is breaking information into parts and studying the relationship of these parts in various ways. The keywords used in analysis, it is given here. They are compare and contrast, distinguish, select, separate, etc. For example, if I ask you to analyze the prefixes and suffixes to understand the meaning, what you would do? You would break them up into words into prefixes and suffixes, and you would try to understand the meaning of these words. So, that is analysis. And now comes the fifth one in cognitive domain according to Bloom's taxonomy, that is synthesis. What is synthesis? Synthesis is actually putting ideas or parts together to form new patterns or wholes. The key words used are categorize, generalize, reconstruct, predict, combine, etc. Okay? And the last one in the hierarchy is evaluation. It is considered to be the topmost level. Evaluation is the ability to make judgments or appraisals based on the knowledge or given criteria. So, the keywords used here are the learner compares ideas and he solves, judges things. Okay. To give you an example, if I ask you to discuss the opinion regarding a book that you have read, that is a judgment level question, because you have your own ways of understanding the book and you give your own opinions about the book. Okay? Yes. So, that is all about the Bloom's taxonomy. The strength of, what is the strength of Bloom's taxonomy? So, I am not here to tell more about Bloom's taxonomy, but when we write learning objectives, we should have in mind, or we should know Bloom's taxonomy. That is why I am taking all the pain. So, the strength of Bloom's taxonomy is that it has taken a very important factor of learning, that is thinking. So, learning means thinking, enabling the students to think. So, again it encourages higher order thinking skills. Even an average teacher, if he or she knows Bloom's taxonomy well, he would try his best, or he would try her best to reach this, the students come up to the higher level. But Bloom's taxonomy has its own weakness also. One of the weakness that we can see is some beautiful learning activities like problem solving skills or projects cannot be correctly mapped to the taxonomy. So, what happened in 2001, some cognitive psychologists including Anderson, Kathwal, Dave, they tried to make Bloom's taxonomy more relevant and accurate. Okay? So, the second taxonomy that they all developed in 2001 is called revised Bloom's taxonomy. How is the first one different from the second one? In the traditional Bloom's taxonomy, the subcategories are presented using nouns. We can see from the slide that we have seen earlier. See, look at that. From knowledge it starts, it goes on to comprehension, then to application, then analysis, synthesis and evaluation. But when you come to the revised Bloom's taxonomy, it is written in terms of verbs. The nouns have been changed to verbs. Look at the second slide, this slide now. You can see instead of knowledge you see remember, then comes understand, apply, analyze, evaluate and create. Okay. And now, and another one which is very important, Bloom has in the revised Bloom's taxonomy, it is two dimensional. In the first taxonomy that Bloom made, he had only one dimension, that is the cognitive dimension. He said that learning takes place in different levels starting from knowledge and it goes up to the higher level, that is evaluate. Here in Bloom's taxonomy, in revised Bloom's taxonomy, it is two dimensional. As you can see from the slide, you have got both cognitive process dimension and the knowledge process dimension as an x axis and y axis. And the revised Bloom's taxonomy has become two dimensional, including the knowledge domain with the cognitive domain. Now, let us see a little bit about the knowledge domain, because we have dealt with the cognitive domain. Knowledge domain has four categories. Again, it is there on the slide. The four categories are factual knowledge, conceptual knowledge, procedural knowledge and meta knowledge. Okay. I repeat, factual knowledge, conceptual knowledge, procedural knowledge and meta knowledge. Then what is factual knowledge? Factual knowledge is the basic knowledge of some facts, knowing specific details of something. Then comes conceptual knowledge. Conceptual knowledge is knowledge of concepts, theories, principles, ideas, etc. So, what is procedural knowledge? Procedural knowledge is a knowledge of some procedure, how to do perform a special task or specific task. Okay. Then meta knowledge. So, what is meta knowledge? In metacognitive knowledge, it is in the knowledge about the thinking process. Meta language is it is the language about the language about language. Okay. So, just like that in meta knowledge we think about how we think. Okay. So, I have told you in Bloom's taxonomy, revised Bloom's taxonomy has differences from the first one and it is two dimensional in nature. You have got both cognitive domain process and the knowledge domain. Okay. Yes. So, friends, we were discussing the Bloom's taxonomy with regard to the cognitive domain. Dear friends, now let us look at very quick look at the affective domain. We all know that teaching and learning is not just acquiring knowledge or thinking. It involves feelings, beliefs, it includes attitudes, appreciations, then emotions, etc., etc. So, we have the second domain that is called affective domain. It was put forward by, it is also put in hierarchical order as we see in Bloom's taxonomy. It was these levels were developed by Kathwal. Okay. So, in 1964 Kathwal set these domains, these categories into 5 levels. Let us go through it very quickly. The first one is, you can see from the slide, the first one is in the affective domain is receiving, that is the lowest level, receiving. Okay. Lowest level in affective domain. It starts with students receiving information and positively attending to it. For example, Let me make this clear with an example. A student listens to an announcement made by the principal to meet at a particular room near the office to tell if they want to know more about joining NSS, National Service Scheme, they have to come. This was the announcement made by the principal. So, if a student receives this, okay, if a student hears this or listens to this announcement, it can be called receiving. And the second one in the affective domain is responding. Okay, so what is responding? Responding is the willingness to act. If that particular student who listens to the announcement, if he goes to that particular room to learn or to understand more about NSS, joining NSS, then we can say that he has responded.